Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Read and Reread. I'm Angelia, and today it's time for Friday Reads. No clickbait, no gimmicks. It's just a straight up Friday Reads, and mostly about books. I don't really have any interesting tidbits or adventures to tell you about this week. And in the bookish world, I guess the next big news would be Monday, the Pulitzer Prize announcements. It's always a big mystery since they don't do long lists and short lists. So we shall see if anybody predicted correctly. Last year, it kind of came out of left field, at least in the fiction division, so we'll see. In TV viewing, we're really not watching. What are we watching? We got stuck. We decided to discontinue Breaking Bad, at least for now. Neither of us, we realized we were enjoying the rewatch like we thought we would. And so we kind of shelved that. We were looking for something more entertaining. And there's several shows coming up that kind of fit the bill. It just needs something a little more escapist, more White Lotus kind of level of vibes. We started watching one called, is it My Friends and Neighbors or Your Friends and Neighbors? Anyway, it has John Hamm in it. And we just watched the first episode. It's based on a Jonathan Tropper novel. It's about a guy who is very successful. He's worked his way up to the big corner office, and I don't know exactly what his company does, but he's very wealthy. In a short space of time, he finds himself divorced and unemployed and kind of adrift and lonely and low on the funds. Everything in his life is still moving forward. His kids have expenses. He's accustomed to a certain level of lifestyle, and so this is all in the trailer, so I'm not giving anything away. And it just kind of begins in the first episode. He's going to start stealing from the wealthy homes of the people that he has associated with all these years. We'll see. It was kind of sad too. It's kind of a dark comedy. So that's it. That's it on the TV front for now. So I guess we can just move right on into the books, starting with a couple of things that I did finish this week. I read the rest of Brother Bronte by Fernando Flores. This is really different. Flores' style is really unusual. I talked a little bit about it last week. The way his descriptive style and the way that he combines unexpected things into his similes and metaphors. Very interesting style. I really liked the atmosphere of this novel. I'll back up for a second in case you missed my previous discussion, but it is a dystopian novel. It's set in the somewhat near future, maybe about 20 years in the future, and it takes place in South Texas in a town that is not far from where I live. He has fictionalized the town of Three Rivers, Texas, and in this future version, the small town that it actually is was first inflated and then dropped when some tech titans moved in, kind of like Elon Musk is doing down here in South Texas. And then they abandoned whatever those projects were, and so the town kind of rose and crumbled. And there's been authoritarian changes in the U.S. in the story, and he's writing I don't know when he wrote this, what year, but some of it, as often happens in dystopian literature, you think, oh my gosh, this is a little too close for comfort. The town is run by this kind of maniacal, ham-fisted mayor, and books and education have been discouraged and outlawed. Our main characters are former members of a punk band that has no longer bands. They don't have instruments. Their instruments were lost or stolen and can no longer be reclaimed. Our main character, Neftali, loves to read and is always trying to get her hands on these contraband books. All the women in the town who have children are forced to work in this fish cannery as indentured servants, and then their children receive ration cards to live off of, but they're kind of on their own and out on the streets. Most of the fathers have gone to look for work somewhere else. The vibe and the feel and the mood of the whole thing is kind of like a mashup between a Victorian England industrial setting with all the street urchin type characters. Then there's an element of the movie Brazil. There's some classic dystopian situations, and there's this Tex-Mex element, the culture of the area. I left this book with the biggest craving for tamales, because there's this whole part of the story about these women. They're called the Tias, and they're kind of an underground movement that is both humanitarian and subversive, and they have this secret tamale machine, and they make hundreds and hundreds of tamales, and then they distribute them philanthropically, but they also use them as a barter system. And the constant description of these warm tamales and the smell and the people being really hungry because everyone's kind of hand to mouth. And I just, even talking about now, I'm thinking, I need to go, I don't really know how to make tamales, but I need to go get some. There's also a whole storyline about a Bengal tiger that mysteriously appears in the neighborhood where it really shouldn't be. And it's just, the plot is pretty crazy. I love the atmosphere and his style of writing. There's definitely some loose threads. There's a main character that just sort of trails off and he fails to tell what happened to her. There's another character that seems like they're being brought in to be an important side story, and then we never go back to that story. So it wasn't a perfect novel, but it was a very entertaining novel, and it was, for how weird it is, it was surprisingly timely as well. So I did enjoy Brother Bronte by Fernando Flores. The next book that I finished, and I was reading at the same time, but quite different indeed, and in almost every way, was The Narrow Road to the Deep North by Richard Flanagan, a previous winner of the Booker Prize. And I read this as a buddy read with my friend Michael, and we both thought this was a really strong novel. I think we pretty much agreed on the same strengths and weaknesses of this novel. It was just really powerful. There's a limited series adaptation of this novel, and I think it's on Prime, which I don't have, and I don't know. I mean, I know it's supposed to be really good and the book's really good. I don't know if I can watch it though. It's just pretty brutal story. So it's about an Australian surgeon in World War II who ends up in a Japanese POW camp, and his job is to care for the men in the camp. And the situation, of course, just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. The disease, the injuries, the ailments, the complete lack of sanitation and conditions, the brutality of the camp. These are all reasons why I avoid war stories in general. But I think I talked about this last week. The writing is so good. And so we followed Dorigo Evans, who fell in love and had a brief affair with his uncle's wife right before he went off to war. He's supposed to be getting married to this other woman named Ella, but he fell in love with Amy. And then he goes off to war. And then we have lots of intense wartime scenes. And then we also follow Dorigo and several other of the men in their post-war lives. Flanagan really excels at writing about these men and their complicated traumas and how it affects them in their lives after the war. He moves around to several people that we were introduced to in this wartime camp, including the Japanese commander, and we come back to them and find out how they fared and the ongoing legacy of being part of this horrendous time in their history. I think we both agreed that he did not excel whatsoever at writing about women in this book. The women are just sort of back in the corners. They kind of mainly exist in the men's minds. The women as full-blown characters. He doesn't write, to me, he didn't write very convincingly about the women. They just sort of exist as a part of the complicated psychology of the men's lives. But their own stories. Even when he does attempt to shift a couple of times and give them a little screen time, it's not very complete or convincing to me. So I didn't think he did really well on that front. But the story, the main core of the story, I thought was really beautifully told. It was a difficult novel to read, but it was worthwhile, and I understand why it was considered and then did win the Booker Prize. Then I also finished my poetry anthology, 44 poems on being with each other, that is assembled and lovingly curated by Padraig Tuama. The structure, I've talked about it. Each poem, he first has a little intro, and a lot of times there's some just a little personal note or something about, it gives you a little hint of maybe what the theme of the next poem will be. And then there's a poem, and then there is an essay where he discusses the poem, and he gives just enough attention to actual poetic devices, language, structure, rhyme, meter, things like that, the mechanics of the poem. But then he also really zeroes in on the emotional heft of the poem. It weaves in and out his own interpretation with invitations to think about it yourself. I don't know, it's really hard to explain why it's so effective, but his way of discussing literature, I just really love it. It really clicks with me. He's not telling you what the poem's about. He's not telling you what the theme of the poem is. He is guiding you into thought and interpretation, sharing a little bit about what he is getting from it, but it's never didactic. And that's what I really love about this and the first Poetry Unbound collection. And also, there's a few older poems, but I really appreciate all the contemporary and newer poets that I've been introduced to. The next book that I finished came in for me at the library, and I figured I better hurry up and read it before it got away. Somebody else is going to request it. By the way, this has happened before. That is not a fire. That is a reflection of the overhead light and the ceiling fan in a picture frame. So no, I don't have a little miniature fire blazing on my bookcase. Anyway, the book is 3 Days in June by Anne Tyler. It's a shorty. I don't think it's even, maybe it's about 180 pages, maybe less. No, 165. It was bittersweet. It was satisfying for the most part. I talked about in my TBR that I was going to be thinking about my mom when I read this book because she loved Anne Tyler, and if she was still here today, I'd probably be giving this to her for Mother's Day because the timing of the book's release was really perfect, and I think she would have really liked the book. So this is about Gail Barnes, who is, I think she says she's 61 in this story. She is an assistant to the headmistress at a private school. She previously was a very talented math teacher, and then she moved into administration. And at the start of this book, she has a run-in with her boss that possibly has resulted in her no longer having that job. And on the same day, it is the day before her daughter's wedding, and her ex-husband shows up with a cat in a carrier because he announces that he has been fostering a cat, and he was supposed to stay at the daughter's place, who rejected him with the cat because her fiance is very allergic to cats. So he shows up unannounced to Gail's and announces he's staying there, and then their daughter comes over, and she's having a little crisis as well. So all of these things happen, and it is indeed 3 days in June. We have the day before the wedding, we have the wedding day itself, and it ends on the day after the wedding. The writing style is classic Anne Tyler. She just has a wonderful way of description that is funny and warm. She just can really capture a character and get them up and running really fast. Just Max shows up with this cat, and just a description of him. I retreated, and he lumbered in, out of breath, shaking the floorboards. Max was nowhere near fat, but he was weighty. Broad-shouldered, he always gave the impression of taking up more than his share of room, although he was not much taller than I was. In the years since we divorced, he had grown the kind of beard that you're not quite sure is deliberate. Maybe he'd merely forgotten to shave for a while. A short gray frizzle with a frizzle of gray hair to match, and he seemed to have given up on his clothes. Generally, he wore stretched-out knit tops and baggy khakis. I hoped he brought a suit for the wedding. You never can be sure. Reader, he did not bring a suit for the wedding, and that's one of the situations in the story. I really liked Max in this story. Gail is a tricky one. Gail's boss makes some comment about her not being really not having good people skills, and she's kind of shocked. And when she brings this up later, people are kind of like, oh, yeah, really? Like something about herself that she has not noticed for decades has suddenly come out into the light. And Gail's kind of awkward. She reflects that she and Max, when married, were notorious for always being the first ones to leave a party. Their bandwidth of social interaction hits the wall pretty fast. And we do eventually find out, because they seem to be pretty amiable and pretty compatible, even though they find each other mildly annoying. But we do find out why they actually did divorce later on in the story. And anyway, it's a short novel. It was quite satisfying. My drawback is that it is a little bit slight, and some of her novels do tend to do this. She doesn't go really deep. She suggests at depths that you kind of wish she went further into them. And she does this in most novels. It doesn't quite get as full as I would like it to. And the other thing is that there's a situation in this story with Gail's character, her personality and her character, that reminded me of both something from Olive Kitteridge and something from Lucy Barton by Elizabeth Strout. And I don't really think that's doing Anne Tyler a good service to herself to do anything that makes you think about Elizabeth Strout, because Elizabeth Strout, she does go deeper. She manages to write something that at first seems light, but really the depths and the darker sides actually are there. And so, I mean, if there was a battle of writers, I think I'd have to give the trophy to Strout, but I really enjoy Anne Tyler books. So I didn't really think it was a great idea to have a scenario that was quite similar to one that occurred in the Elizabeth Strout well-known book. I don't want to say any more because I don't want to give out any spoilers, but if you are a big reader of both, you'll get to that part and think, oh, that kind of sounds like... So anyway, but I did enjoy it. It was a quickie. If you need something kind of on the lighter side, kind of on the more buoyant side, but it's still a well-written short story, not a short story, but a short novel story, I do recommend 3 Days in June. All right, so that brings me to what I am currently reading. And these are not lighthearted books. One of them is Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller. I think I'll probably read the rest of this today because it is short, and I'm in Act 2. It's a 2-act play, of course, a classic American play about the American dream and one man's great disappointments and real or perceived failures and successes in life, and very complicated dynamics with his sons. And we're reading it for my endless drama project, and it's just the beginning of the month, so I don't really want to go too far into it. I really am loving it again, and that theme of loneliness and disappointment and regret. And so this play was written in the late 40s, and I'm looking to see which themes are still just as timely today, what makes this a classic. So I'm continuing to read, and then our discussion will be unfolding on the Discord. I'm also reading the young adult classic, The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. This was written in the 1960s, and I read it back in middle school. I read it at a time where I think several iconic stories about teenage groups, teenage gangs, the opposition groups, and the romance in the center, and that kind of thing. I read them all kind of at the same time. Romeo and Juliet, and The Outsiders, and seeing West Side Story. So it's all kind of a piece in my mind. But I know when I read The Outsiders, I really loved it and went on to read the other books that she had written at the time. She wrote it as a teenager, and rereading it, it's got more of that YA kind of feel to me, but I'm still enjoying the emotional levels in the story as told by Pony Boy, a 14-year-old boy who is the youngest of three brothers, and the oldest brother, who could not be more than 20, is trying to hold the family together. Their parents have died. Ponyboy idolizes the middle brother, Soda Pop. He thinks he doesn't get along with Derry, but the way that they don't get along is more like a teenage boy rebelling against a father. And as an adult, I really am sympathizing more with Derry than I probably did as a kid, who's trying to be the head of household at a very young age of his own. I'm a couple chapters in, so I don't know. I can't remember what happens exactly. He meets a girl named Sherry Valance, who's from the richer group, but they sort of have a connection, and they meet at the movies, and that's about as far as I got. So I know something terrible happens. I can't remember exactly how it unfolds. So I shall read on and see how it goes. After I finish those, I have so many good things to choose from. So I don't know for sure this will be what I selected. This is what I was thinking. If I had to pick the next books today, here's what I pick. I might change my mind and grab something else and go in a different order, but I'm really feeling it for The Great Gatsby, especially coming off of Death of a Salesman. This another examination of the American dream, and its elusive nature. So I think I might pick this up. Also, this perennial bridesmaid book that I really need to get to, On Such a Full Sea by Chang-Rae, and it's been almost a week since I was engulfed in a dystopia, so surely it's time to go back to another one. So I think I might head into this book as soon as I finish one of these other ones. So that is what, and then also it just came in last night on Libby, was Two Trees Make a Forest, which is the book for Reading the Globe for May. So I probably need to get started on that one as well before my time frame gets away. So that's what I have going on. What are you reading right now? What are you going to read this weekend? Anything exciting going on? Let me know in the comments. I hope that you are doing well and that you have a great weekend, and I will be back soon. Bye.